Hey everyone, this is Mr. Barnett, and this is the walkthrough video for level 2 of the Data Analyst project, which is about frequency. This is an exciting level for you because you have identified a set of data that you want to study. In this level, you're going to be getting that data in something called a spreadsheet, and then starting to analyze it with a mathematical technique called frequency. We have two learning objectives here. The first is about organizing information into something called a frequency table. And then the second is about drawing and then interpreting something called a frequency histogram. So in this video, I'll explain what those things are. I'll tell you how you can complete this level on your own, and then I will let you get right to it. So let's first talk about how we make sense of data. And just to clarify, here I'm talking about quantitative or numerical data. We'll think a little bit more later about how to make sense of categorical data. But in its raw form, and if you get data from the World Bank, data is in its raw form, data is very messy. It's hard to look at unorganized numbers and see patterns. So here's an example that I came up with. This is daily high temperatures in degrees Celsius in a month, right? And I put this up, and it's just a bunch of numbers. It's hard to see a pattern here, right? I mean, we could look through, in some way this tells a story, right? It tells a story, so the temperature was kind of moderate, then it got cold, then it got back to moderate, then it got hot. But if I asked you a question like what was the most common temperature, or how many days was it above 10, it would not be that easy to answer. We'd have to count, and we might make mistakes. And we can imagine if we had a whole year's worth of temperature data, this would be virtually impossible to make sense of, right? It's just a bunch of numbers. Part of the big goal of statistics is taking these numbers and making sense of them. So let's think about how we could do that. One way we can do that is with something called a frequency table. So one way to see patterns is making a frequency table. Frequency refers to how often a given value appears in a data set. So if something is frequent, it appears often. And so here's an example for daily high temperatures. What I have done is I've created ranges of temperature, right? From 0 to 5, from 5 to 10, from 10 to 15, from 15 to 20, from 20 to 25. And I just counted how, in that long list of data, how many days were between 0 and 5. How many between 5 and 10, 10 to 15, etc. Pardon me. Two things to notice. The first is that each class here has an equal width, right? The difference between 0 and 5 is 5. The difference between 5 and 10 is 5. We call that the width of the class, how wide it is, how many values it includes, and it has to be equal. The second is that I'm very precise at the boundaries. So this is greater than or equal to 0, this first class, but less than 5. So if I have a temperature of 5, it's going to go into this second category, right? Where x, the temperature, is greater than or equal to 5, but less than 10. So if I have a temperature of 10, it goes into this category, right? I have to be very precise about where certain values will go. And once I've done that, right, I can answer easily questions like this. What was the most common temperature this month? Well, the highest frequency, the most often, was 10 to 15 degrees. I could also say how many days were above 10 degrees Celsius. Well, I have 13, 7 makes 20, 22 days above 10 degrees Celsius, etc., etc., etc. And if you do some of the Khan Academy practice for this level, you're going to see examples of this and get good practice answering questions with frequency tables. There's one other technique that I want to show you. That technique is something called a histogram. And what a histogram is a graph that shows frequency visually. So basically, it's just a graph representation of a frequency table. Let's take a look at this. Here's our frequency table, and here is a histogram, right? And I would argue that this histogram is even easier to interpret than the frequency table, because I just look and right away it tells me, well, there are a few really cold days, there are a few really warm days. Most days are in the middle between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius, and it's just easy for me to see that. And it also, you'll see if you do Khan Academy, it's easy to make comparisons between data sets with histograms. Instead of having to pour through each number, we see general trends or patterns in this way. And you will be making histograms for your chosen data. Okay, here are the things for you to do at this stage. First is just answer a few introductory questions about frequency. That's the way that you get thinking. Next, you're going to build your skills using those videos on Edpuzzle and the practice assignments on Khan Academy, right? I hope those of you who are using these are finding them helpful. Third, you're going to take notes on what it is that you have learned. This is essential for us to get this learning kind of stuck in our minds. Fourth, you chose in the last, actually at the beginning of this project, a global indicator from the World Bank. I've taken that data, I've put it into something called a Google Sheet, a spreadsheet. I've shared it with you. And using that data, you are going to create frequency tables and histograms for 2 different points in time. So you might have data from 2016 and 1996. You're going to create a frequency table for 1996 and a frequency table for 2016, and you able to compare those things and see maybe how the world has changed in between those points. You'll also create a histogram for both. And in the kind of lesson document, the level document, I've given you instructions on how to create a frequency table, how to create a histogram. And then you're going to need to explain what this data shows you. This is essential, right? Not just creating the graphs, but explaining what they mean. You'll review your work with me once you've done that. And then, as always, you have a self-assessment survey measuring from you, have you got the understanding from this that you want to have about frequency tables and histograms? However I can help support you, please let me know. And good luck with this level.